Now, the main topic we have for the show, this is like the big one, I would say, is what constitutes a gaming generation. Wes had brought this topic up. His son actually brought it up to him. Wes brought it up to me. And Wes and I were both kind of like, I don't know. This might be all right. But then we started looking at like a Wikipedia list that actually tells us, this generation is this, this, and this. So we're going to use that list from Wikipedia, which you can all go look up, as a baseline and say that this is the standard generation according to the people. And we're going to dispute some of that and we're going to agree with some of it. We're just going to go through it basically. Before we get into like, do we agree with what's in here and do we disagree?
Mhm.
Wes, what are some key features that you would look at as constituting a generation?
Well, when my son actually asked me this question, I'm like, first of all, my son thinks too much because he just comes out when he does think it's like you get something profound. I'm like, he asked me, he's like, so Dad, let me ask you a question. You've gamed for a long time. What is a generation to you? I'm like, I don't know. I said, I gotta think about that. And I
But
really thought about it.
he asked it the right way, though. What is a generation to you? Because you could ask 100 people this and they could all give you a different answer. That's why
Right.
we're using the Wikipedia list as a baseline to like say this is what the people say, and then this is what we have to say about it. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that after I thought about it, I said, would be the advancement in technology. Because every
Mm-hmm.
time technology changes, I believe we go into a new generation of consoles.
Sure, you get that power boost, you get that graphics boost. I mean,
Hmm.
you see it a lot with older stuff now. I think we've kind of tapered off a little bit with at least visuals, right? With visuals, there's Xbox 360 games that look pretty damn good still. I don't think they
Yep.
look perfect compared to modern games, but they still look
Mhm.
pretty damn good.
They still look
Whereas
great.
you compare an Atari 2600 game to an NES game, it's like, oh my god, like what, what the hell is this?
Yeah, the first thing pops into my head when you say that is for the Atari 2600, you had Adventure, which was a pseudo role playing game, but the dragons looked like ducks, and you're this little square. But then we go to Nintendo, 8-bit or Super Nintendo, and dragons actually kind of look like dragons.
Yeah, no doubt.
Big boost in technology and graphics, and so. But yeah, that at that point we're talking about two different generations of consoles.
Right. It's not fair to really compare the 2600 to the NES because the NES had so much more power. They couldn't possibly be the same. No way.
But how does that sound? Like the NES had so much more power. Like the the NES,
I
especially
mean,
compared to today. It's like wow, like really?
at that time, it did though.
Yes, it did. At that time, it did. When you go
For
back
for
and think
about
about
for about that long, and then the Turbo Graphics came out in Japan.
it. So yeah, so what? That's one of the things that I look at when we talk about defining a generation is, how often the technology changed
I got to correct
within
myself. PC Engine was in Japan. Turbo Graphics was in the US.
was in
Go ahead. I'm
America.
sorry.
Yep. So now, so that was it for me. That was like the one thing that I told them. What about you? What stands out for you as far as defining a generation?
Physically, the way things are sometimes. So like a big change was uh, moving away from cartridges. Everything was disc based, right? And then disc based now is like digital only, and discs are becoming like extinct for the most part. They're still around, there are still physical games. Or an interesting one is like Nintendo going from cartridges to discs, and basically now back to cartridges with the DS. Well, I'll give it, or I'm sorry, the DS and like the Switch.
Mhm.
They are like cartridges, but they're just like
Memory
discs.
cards.
Yeah, they look like memory cards. They're tiny. The DS was that way, the 3DS that way, the Switch is that way. So they kind of reverted back. They were like, all right, we'll do this disc thing, and they were like, all right, that's enough. Like pretty quickly went back.
Yeah, man. And then we talk about the change from 2D to 3D. Older generations, everything was 2D,
Mhm.
was
That
two
was huge.
dimensional. It was and it was fine. And I miss 2D. I really do. And then we got into like I guess the start of 3D with Wolfenstein and Duke Nukem and Doom and stuff, and then everything started to shift to a new generation of 3D games. Like everything had to be 3D. But yeah, again, that's just another benchmark when we talk about generations.
Yeah, so those are the things that some of the things that define them for us. But let's
Mhm.
hop into this Wikipedia list and talk. Basically, we're just going to look at it, say if we agree, disagree, add some context, and just move forward. The first generation, according to this list, is from 1972 to 1980. It includes the Odyssey, Atari Pong, Coleco, Telestar,
Mhm.
and that's it. I guess I wasn't alive then, so this is really hard for me to say. Like, I'm gonna have to defer to Wes on this. Sure, I'm gonna say sure. That's the first generation.
You know what? Yes, I would agree because I had my Magnavox Odyssey, which was basically just a bunch of variations of Pong. But to me, that would be the start of the first generation because it introduced everybody to video games. Period.
Yeah, I mean, this really was like a version of Pong. And what you would do, you would have the old CRT. You would
Hmm.
have these overlays, and you would have to place them on the screen, and that would make the screen look different. And then you'd have the Pong ball to play whatever the game showed you on the overlay. Is that correct?
The Odyssey didn't. The Odyssey just hooked up. I mean, there were some systems that did exactly what you said with the
Oh, I
overlays.
thought the Odyssey had overlays. No.
No, the one I didn't. We just hooked it up, with the RF adapter and stuff, and turned it on, and
Hmm.
and and you just had the controller, and you just kind of picked what variation of Pong you wanted to play, and that was it. That was simple, man.
Maybe it was the Odyssey 2 then. I could have sworn one of those Odysseys had overlays, but maybe I'm thinking of Odyssey 2. Maybe that's possible.
Could be, could be. I just remembering the one I had. It was basic, but at any rate, it still that started. That was the first generation of consoles.
Right. And Atari just had Pong at that time. It was Atari's version of Pong, right? Which was
Pong.
probably one of the most popular ones. Correct? Was the Atari
That,
Pong version?
that was it. And then we get into the second generation, which, according to Wikipedia, ran from 1976 to 1992. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of overlap between Gen 1 and Gen 2,
Right.
but
You're going to see that as a frequent thing too. A lot of these generations are going to have some overlap, and it's just because that console continued to make games while new consoles came out.
yeah, because in the second generation of consoles, you had the Atari 2600, the Odyssey 2, you had Intellivision, and you had ColecoVision.
Yep.
So, out of that list, the Atari 2600 was the king. I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody had an Atari. Everybody, Intellivision came out. My friend had an Intellivision, and we played back and forth. He'd come to my house, play my Atari. I'd go to his house, play Intellivision. But he wound up spending most of his time at my house because he liked the Atari better.
Yeah,
uh,
I don't have much experience with any of these except for the 2600. So, I mean, my default would be that was probably the best one. It also sold the best, so it was probably for a reason. It probably was superior. Not to say that those other consoles didn't have any games. I do want to give a quick shout out to the Channel F. That was the first console that introduced cartridge based games where it didn't have just whatever was on the console. This gave you the
mhm.
ability to put in cartridges and play different games. So that was like huge.
I don't remember Channel F. I don't remember that at all.
I've never played one. I didn't own one, but I just know that that was the first console that had cartridges.
Okay.
The
I mean,
gentleman who made them, he passed away like within the past few years. Google even had him on their main page, and I can't remember his name right now, but obviously he's someone of huge importance in the industry.
okay, okay. And then we had the ColecoVision, which I wound up getting later because it had Donkey Kong on it, and I love Donkey Kong. Everybody knows I love the arcade, and I love Donkey Kong.
Did
So
that version
seeing,
play better than the Atari 2800 or
oh
2600 version?
man, leaps and bounds better. It
Yeah.
looked I can't even express how different the Coleco version of Donkey Kong was than the Atari. He looked like Donkey Kong.
Did the Coleco version have like was it like 8-bit graphics? Was it like a huge improvement over Atari, or was it about the same?
No, it was big improvement.
It was a big improvement. Okay, I didn't know
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, looking back at it now, I mean, compared to like the Atari 2600, yeah, it was big difference.
Hmm.
But that was what we had, and just seeing, the ColecoVision graphics compared to Atari 2600, it was a difference. It was a difference. But the Atari still was the most popular.
Yeah, it certainly was. It beat out everything at that point until the video game crash happened, and Atari kind of waned a little bit, and
Mhm.
then a little company called Nintendo came in and changed all that and brought back the entire industry that they thought was a fad. And obviously, video games are bigger than ever today. They're bigger than movies. They're the biggest entertainment industry in the world, essentially. And Nintendo did that during this 8-bit generation, which was from 1983 to 2003, according to Wikipedia. I'm going to say that again, according to Wikipedia. And I think the reason you see 2003 is there was probably like some random company releasing like an NES game in 2003 because it was like, oh, I want to make an NES game, and it probably got some officially licensed thing or something. I don't know, but there you have it.
Okay,
Also, the Master System was alive in like Brazil forever, so that could have been that was probably a Master System game.
okay, because I was going to say I definitely do not agree that this third generation of consoles lasted until 2003. I would
No,
give it. I would give it maybe 2000. I'm not 2000. 1987, 88, maybe 89, maybe 89. Only because the Nintendo was unstoppable, and it sold forever.
kind of with you. The Turbo Graphics came out in like in the US. I want to say it was like 87 ish, somewhere around there, 87, 88. But the Genesis was 89. That for me, that's got to be the next generation, right? So TurboGrafx slash Genesis, the beginning of the 16-bit era. Talking about that, right? That's got to be the beginning, right? That's got to be where the changeover takes place. So you can say it was till 2003. That's fine. I'm just no, you're wrong. There's no
Yeah,
way.
no, because in the third gen we had the NES, we had the Sega Master System, and then technically we had the Atari 7800. Atari was still trying to hang in there.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
you
trying.
know, uh, you know what, the Master System. I love the Master System. I really did. Um, it just couldn't keep up with Nintendo. It really couldn't keep up with Nintendo. But it had Sega on it, so you had
I would have taken a
you know
Master System over a 7800. That's for sure.
you know what? I, okay, I'm kind of torn. I mean, I definitely love my Master System, but I also had a 7800, and again, it was about the arcade experience, and Atari had the rights to a lot of arcade hits.
Okay, I get that.
So the
But,
7800
but wasn't that
kind of
controller
survived on
butt?
that.
Wasn't that the controller like absolute trash? Wasn't it that?
Yeah, it
I
was.
know one of the Atari systems was, and I think it was that one, right?
I have to believe it was that one. It was either that or the 5200, but yeah, one of them was garbage.
Could have been the 5200, but one of those I've seen the controllers like, what the hell is this monstrosity?
But yeah, man, we had the 8-bit era, with the Master System, and I loved it. You had Sega on there. I mean, the Nintendo, like I said, just couldn't be stopped because Nintendo had every game imaginable on their
Oh,
platform.
huge library at that
Huge.
time. Its library is like this big now compared to the amount of games that come out every month. But yeah, that library was fantastic. Fourth generation, like I mentioned, was the 16-bit generation. TurboGrafx, Genesis, Neo Geo, Super NES. So the Neo Geo is the oddball out, in my opinion.
I agree.
I don't know, man. Like this might be. Yeah, it came out early, but wasn't the Neo Geo like $800 or something?
It was super expensive. It was
Yeah,
super expensive. But then, okay, we got TurboGrafx, Genesis, Neo Geo, Super NES.
right. They
Um,
all make sense, except I'm kind of disputing the Super. Or I'm sorry, the Neo Geo, just because I feel like I don't know. I feel like it was way more powerful than all three of those other systems.
yeah. Well, okay, it was. It really was. But So, okay, so we're saying Wikipedia is saying the fourth generation existed from
87.
1987 to 2004,
Well,
which
that's
again,
wrong.
we don't agree with that
Right.
at all. But where does the 3DO fit in? Because if you're going to put the Neo Geo in the fourth gen,
Oh, that's not even on this list. I
it's
just
not.
realized that. I think a 3DO probably fits in there, though. I think it's
I,
got to be part of that fourth gen.
I would throw that in there too because that was at the time the most powerful system available, but it was just godly expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that was that was starting the height of video gaming. Games were fun, man. The TurboGrafx really didn't get a whole lot of love, except for Splatterhouse and a few other standouts. But the Genesis and the Super NES, bro, come on, man. That was gaming bliss right there. Well, the one thing I noticed that so far we're we're in the fourth generation. Again, TurboGrafx, Genesis, Neo Geo, 3DO, Super NES. And just kind of like I pointed out earlier, the advancement in technology from the first gen up to this point till now holds true. New technology,
Mm-hmm.
new generation,
Mm-hmm.
new consoles.
Right. Now we're on to the fifth generation where things start to change a little bit. So this is an interesting generation because there's a clear distinction that Wes was probably alluding to a minute ago, which is two of the three consoles in this generation, according to Wikipedia, are 32-bit, and one of them is 64-bit, which is, of course, the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, and Sega Saturn. Saturn and PlayStation being 32 bits and N64 being 64 bits when Nintendo once cared about power, which is clearly not the case any longer.
Oh, and you know what? We can't forget the Atari Jaguar.
I was thinking that just in my head a minute ago. I was like, I wonder if that when that came out though, did that come out like it must have came out after '93? It had to fit within this window of time.
It was in this definitely within this window.
Why is it not on here? What's wrong with Wikipedia?
I don't know who made this list. That's why they got guys like us to kind of go through it and dissect it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some flaws. Obviously, like I didn't expect this to be perfect or anything. We didn't look over this in detail ahead of time. We just kind of used it as a baseline to have our conversation around. But
Mhm.
Jesus, no Atari Jaguar, no 3DO, and
Mhm.
no what was the other one? Missing something else, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, no 32X or Sega CD,
True.
but still, though, I would say those would still fall under the fourth generation because they were just enhancements to the existing console.
Sure,
They
that
weren't
would
like
make
a new
sense.
system. So, but yeah, no, man, fifth gen. There's no Atari Jaguar, but Saturn, PlayStation 64, Atari Jaguar. Increase in technology, increase in power, increase in graphics, especially with the introduction of the PlayStation.
Yeah, having the 3D graphics for the first time. The Saturn's a weird hybrid. Let's mention that for a second because the Saturn was like, we talked about it before.
Mhm.
It was really in a next version, a successor to what was the Genesis slash 32X slash Sega CSX, whatever the hell else they had. It was really a successor to that, and it was really made to do 2D. And I think through the development, they realized 3D was going to be bigger, and they started changing a bunch of stuff to make it 3D compatible, which is also why it's one of the hardest systems to emulate for, because the internals are so strange. But you got the Saturn actually does have quite a lot of 2D stuff and a lot of 3D stuff as well. It did do both.
It did. It did. I mean, we talked about it once before. You know, back then, word had it that Sega got a hold of the specs for the PlayStation and saw what it had in under the hood and got scared and went back and threw a hodgepodge of 3D chips and But if you compared the two side by side, the PlayStation definitely did a much better job with 3D games.
No doubt.
Um, but 2D, Saturn was king. X-Men: Children of the Atom on the Saturn and on the PlayStation played totally different. The Saturn destroyed it.
It just depends on what you were looking at too, because then if you look at games like the N64 to the PlayStation, those were dramatically different. Also, granted, the 64 had twice the power the PlayStation
Mhm.
did, but you know, the 64 people would always pin it, oh, it has cartoony graphics, and it really did. It really, really did. Like even the stuff that looked realistic still kind of looked cartoony. Where PlayStation, like for the first time, like looked pretty dang at that time, pretty dang realistic. You know what I mean? Not now, but that back then it did.
But 64 gave me Killer Instinct, so I was happy.
I mean, 64 is the greatest system of all time. Everybody knows that. You're wearing the shirt. Don't deny it, Wes.
Eh, I don't know, man. As much as I have a love hate relationship with PlayStation, I don't know, man. The PlayStation changed the game. They really did. They
Yeah,
defined that generation, no doubt.
I had a PS1 late, and I was like kind of into it. I was like, there's some cool stuff here, but it was really PS2 for me where I became a PlayStation fan. I was like, oh my god, man! I just remember like I had a GameCube, a PS2, and an Xbox, and I would buy some games for my Xbox because they were more powerful. I would
Mhm.
buy all my first party Nintendo stuff on the GameCube, obviously, and then like just the PS2's library was so exceptional. I would just go. You could so find so much cool, weird stuff on that library that was my system of choice. I was constantly buying games for my PS1, constantly,
Yeah.
or PS2. Sorry, PS2.
Okay. But I'm just this. That's just I keep thinking about the fifth generation, and just us reminiscing, and bro takes me back. But seeing stuff like Rayman
Mm-hmm.
for the first time on any console, Saturn, Jaguar, PlayStation, it looked fantastic. Hand painted
So did Tomb Raider. Like Tomb Raider
2D
looked awesome.
platform. Oh, back in the day, yeah, Tomb Raider looked great. Resident Evil 2 for PlayStation.
Oh man, Resident Evil looked. You thought games were never going to look better than Resident Evil, man. You were like, this is amazing. It's never going to get better. I mean, it looks like crap now, but back then it was like, it's never going to get better than this.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean, there's definitely some Symphony of the Night.
Oh my god. I
And
mean that.
again, we're talking 2D, but it still looked fantastic and played fantastic.
But those 2D games still look fantastic.
Yes,
They
they
still
do.
look fantastic. The 3D ones look kind of ugly now, but those 2D ones still look good.
They do. They do. Then we move into the sixth gen, which is when I guess video gaming got serious because we got the Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox.
Mm-hmm. Lots of goodness all around.
Oh, goodness, all around, all around. And we got four incredible systems in the sixth gen. Granted, the Dreamcast didn't last long.
It
Breaks
didn't.
my heart. Breaks my heart. It really did. I wish it could have hung around sooner longer, but it is what it is. You know, Xbox is technically the Dreamcast successor. I don't care what anybody
True.
says.
It is.
But
Sega started
it,
making
it
all a bunch of games for them. They did have a couple GameCube ones too, but they really Xbox was like their best friend once.
oh yeah,
They stopped
man.
making hardware.
But then we got PlayStation 2, which just picked up where the last gen left off. GameCube. It's such goodness, such goodness. I mean, they're saying the time period is 1998 to
2013, because again, they probably are counting like some random game that got officially published like later on.
yeah. But I don't agree with the dates, but we can agree that this is definitely the sixth generation going forward. And again, it's
Mm-hmm.
the increase in technology because we got the rise of online gaming.
Mm-hmm. Dreamcast started that.
We got, the introduction of back then high definition graphics.
Yep, this is the Xbox had the first ones that had component cables, and then eventually
Mhm.
GameCube did. So did PS2.
Yep. We got the introduction of hard drives in consoles. So I mean, again, it goes back to increase in technology, advancement in technology, new generation. So this
Yep.
is oh, that's I don't man. So far, we okay. We talked about six generations so far. Up to this point, what's your favorite generation?
Mm. Oh, dude. I'd have to give it some more thought. I mean, the N64 is like my favorite console of all time, but this generation is a contender just because I had all those systems.
Hmm.
And this was the first time in my life where I was working like regularly and I could afford everything. I had every console for the first time, so I played all sorts of stuff. This generation is very special, the sixth generation. Um, but it might be this point. It could also be the 16-bit era when I had the Genesis. That was like super special for me.
Okay.
But
So
it's
you're
it's
talking
really hard. It's really hard to say.
okay, you're talking about the fourth generation. Okay. I mean, I can't answer it either. I mean, so far, like, I live in fourth, fifth, and sixth generation of consoles.
Mhm.
Those were my favorite, but I don't think I have right now up to this point a favorite generation. I
At
like
this
them
point,
all.
I don't know. Yeah, I like them all
It's
too.
tough. It's tough, but yeah, no, I definitely live within fourth, fifth, and sixth so far. Um, I really enjoyed the sixth generation, but I have a lot of fond memories of the fourth and fifth too.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
like different aspects of them all, but the sixth generation, at the very least, is very, very special. Very special.
oh yes. But then
Then
we
we
move on to Gen 7.
That's right. This is
Gen 7.
Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii. I want to start out by saying the Wii was very short lived. I had about 2 or 3 years where I was all about the Wii. I was like, this is exciting. We have motion controls. It's something new. And it was. It really was. But eventually I had a handful of games that I loved, and that was it. that was the Wii. Here's like 10 games that are fantastic. And I don't care about anything else on the system. I still kind of
Mm.
feel that way too. I mean, I'm not saying there's not good games in the system. Let me be clear. I'm sure there's plenty of good games. I'm sure I could discover some good games, but there was so much shovelware, and I didn't feel like
Oh,
shoveling
without
through
doubt.
the shovelware to get to the good stuff. It was just like, okay, Nintendo made this game. All right, I'll buy it. Oh, this game's supposed to be fantastic. All right, I'll buy it.
People were just putting stuff out just to put it out, and it sold because it was on the Wii.
And the motion control gimmick, it wore off after like
It
three
did.
3 or 4 years. People were like, I'm done. I'm done with it. I don't want to get up anymore. I just want to sit on the couch. Leave me alone.
I'm tired of replacing my TV screens,
Mm-hmm. Throwing the remotes through them.
throwing the
Absolutely.
remotes. But and then we had the 360 though, man. You can't deny it. 360 was king of that generation.
Yeah, I've had ebbs and flows. Like the generation before this, if I'm being honest with myself, the PS2 owned me. I was a huge fan of the PS2. When this generation came out, 360 was first to strike, and I think that really had a lot to do with converting me to it. I was always an Xbox fan. I had an original Xbox, but this really converted me to being Xbox over PlayStation. I was like, I can't believe how many, and they had so many great games, man. That's all it takes. PS2 had the most games, and it like blew my mind how much of a breadth of a library they had. Same thing with the 360. The 360 outpaced PS3 in just about
Mm-hmm.
every facet. They had so many games from so many genres. The 360 stomped the PS3, and I had a PS3. PS3 was great. They had a lot of great games.
They
It was
did.
not better than the 360. It was not. Period.
No, no, I'm right there with you. Had a PS3 also, and I enjoyed it. I mean, they gave us some really good stuff. They gave us Resistance, they gave us Killzone, with
Uncharted.
Uncharted, but the 360, man, they gave me Bioshock, hands down. They gave me Bioshock. They gave us Gears. They gave us
Years.
Halo.
Mm, mm.
It's and Microsoft was not going to lose on the online front. They destroyed everything else in its path with Xbox Live.
Xbox Live made PlayStation look like a joke when you're talking about like online services. It
Hmm.
wasn't even comparable. I remember like talking to people working in the store, like, "Oh yeah, PS3 online." Like, it's like you don't even understand. Like, it's nothing, man. It's like child's play. They're in a whole different league. They might as well be connected to a dial-up connection. It's completely different.
Microsoft was not losing on that front.
Mm-mm.
But they
Mm-mm.
built, outside of the Red Ring of Death, they built a good machine. Developers loved it. They gave us, so many 360 exclusives, just, Dead Rising and, like Lost Planet. The third party companies were all over it.
Yeah, they were. Everybody supported that thing. It even had a bunch of Japanese games at the time. It had Blue Dragon, Lost
Hmm.
Odyssey. It had Japanese games. It had everything, and it still had Sega games coming out for it as well.
Yes, it did. Yes, it
Hmm.
did.
Then we move on to the eighth generation. Now this is where things get weird, and I'm talking about the Wii U because this thing came out. Well, you know what? I'm gonna take it back. I guess this is part of the eighth generation, but it was so underpowered. It came out a year before the PS3 came. I'm sorry, before the PS4 came out and the Xbox One, and they were magnitudes apart, like in power. Like Xbox One, PS4 were so far ahead of this thing, it wasn't even funny. Now the Wii U laid the groundwork for the Switch. So if you call it a necessary step, I'm glad we got there. The Wii U definitely has some good games, but its library is
Mhm.
small. It didn't sell well. It was like, it's definitely a black eye out of Nintendo's past. Yeah, compared to all its other consoles, it did not do well at all. But in this same generation, you have the Switch, according to Wikipedia,
Mhm.
which I think you and I would actually put the Switch into the next generation with the Xbox Series X, S, and PS5. They say that the ninth generation starts in 2020 to present, and that the eighth generation was 2012 to present. I would argue that the ninth generation started in 2017 when the Switch came out because it's super weird
It
having
is.
one company with two consoles. And I know there was a power thing and it's totally different consoles, but it's just I don't know. The Wii U came out at such a strange time, man.
Because also in the eighth gen with the Wii U, you had the PS4 and the Xbox One,
Hmm.
and then we had the Switch.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I mean, could the Switch be one of those cross generations, the eighth and ninth, or do you just?
it came out 3 years before what they consider the ninth generation in
Hmm.
Wikipedia, but it's also like that's their current console, man. Like
Correct.
that's PS5 and Xbox. Not only that, Switch. There's months where Switch is outselling both of those consoles still. Granted, PlayStation has been kicking butt recently,
Hmm.
but I mean, Switch is still huge. Like now, they're still selling systems constantly. I think it's going to be the second biggest system of all time.
Huh.
I really do. I think it's already surpassed. If it hasn't already surpassed it, it's going too soon. It's on its way to PlayStation 2 status. I don't know. I don't think it's going to replace PlayStation 2 as the biggest console ever, but it's over like 120 million units, and PlayStation was at 150. So PlayStation 2 was at 150 to be clear.
Okay.
Um, which is, it's incredible, man. Like I don't know. It's hard to argue it because it's been out since 2017. It's older, but it's still relevant. It's still
It
so
is.
relevant.
It is. I mean, you saw the amount of people that lined up at our free comic book day when we nerd enthusiasts we gave one away
We gave a Nintendo
as a
Switch, that
reference.
Zelda one, when Tears of the Kingdom
Mhm.
came out. We gave that away.
Oh, the amount of people that crowded around the table to try to win that thing
Hmm.
was insane. So it just shows that there is still a high interest for the Switch.
Super high. And these early reports of the new Nintendo system that's coming out, they didn't say it's going to be backwards compatible with Switch, but all the reports so far confirm that it's another, you know, handheld hybrid, so you can take it with you on the go and connect to a TV. Which I think at this point Nintendo would be so stupid to not do that again. I mean, you have to do that again.
Yeah. But we
But
also got to talk about the PS4 and Xbox One because they also fall in the eighth generation. And
they
I
do.
mean, there's no denying that how great those systems were.
Sure. This was the most disappointing Xbox system ever for me. I mean, this system was not great.
But look, they gave me, after all my years of begging, they gave me Killer Instinct. So I was super happy. That became my favorite system of all time just because of that.
This is when they screwed up their press conference. They screwed up from the very start, like the very start with the Xbox One. They
I
didn't know how to
They
speak to
did.
their customers. They were stupid about what they were marketing. They talked about TV all the time. They didn't talk about games
Mhm.
like during their biggest press conferences. And then they talked about digital rights management at a time where people hated that. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you doing? Shut up. It's better than you just shut up and not say anything to have than to say all the things that they were saying, honestly. But PS4, this was my console of choice at that time. Like PS4 was so many great games on PS4 in my opinion. Like that's where I played games for that generation. That is PS4 above all else.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I did buy a lot of Xbox games for one reason. They did one thing right, and that was backwards compatibility. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that during this generation they were like, "Hey, your original Xbox games, you can play them over here. Your 360 games, you can play them over here. Your Xbox One games, you can play them over here." That really made me buy a lot of third-party stuff on Xbox, knowing that they had a commitment to the future. Where
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation, I didn't know what the hell they were going to do next. I'm like, I don't know, maybe you'll make something. Maybe it'll make something so crazy next time that it doesn't play any games, like it did with the PS3, where it played all those games at first, and then you kind of took it away,
Then
and
they
then
took it away.
right, and then you made the PS3 so complicated to develop for that it doesn't even work on anything still today. Like, I don't know. Xbox kind of won me over with that facet, but I do think PS4 had the better games in that generation. What do you think?
Mm. I don't, you know what? Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I give you that because they did. They gave us Spider Man.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us Spider Man.
They gave us The Last of Us.
They gave us The Last of Us.
Actually, that
They
would have been
gave
part two because part one was technically a PS3 game. To be fair,
PS3. Right. Um, they continue to give us God of War, but
no, they rebooted God of War on that console. They made the best
true.
God of War game of all time.
They did.
That reboot of God of War was so good it wasn't even funny.
But like me, the Xbox gave me, like I said, they gave me Killer Instinct. They gave me Dead Rising 3. They gave us Gears.
They did give
We
us
won't talk.
Gears. I'll give you that.
We won't talk about Halo because Halo Guardians was crap.
I didn't finish it.
Um,
I started playing the campaign and I was like, I just fell out of it. I was like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's but yeah, I'm torn because the PlayStation 4 did give us some really really stellar titles. Xbox One gave us a few good ones.
that's about how I would put it.
Yeah, yeah, they did. And then we're in our current generation now, which is technically the ninth generation
Mm-hmm.
with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5.
Yep.
And we could still kind of throw in Switch because it's still going strong for now, if you want. Especially with the OLED release.
Oh yeah, you gotta have that
You
OLED.
know,
Y'all don't have an OLED, you're doing yourselves dirty. You need to go trade in your old system or do whatever, sell it to somebody, get yourself an OLED.
that's what my daughter says. Well, I still got my original Switch that I barely play, but she was like, "You got to get the OLED. It's so much nicer." But I'm like,
It
I,
is. She's right.
I barely play my Switch as it is.
I mean, my Switch is like probably my secondary console. I'm always bouncing. Right now, I'm always bouncing back and forth. I'm always like, play my Xbox, play my Switch, play my PlayStation, play my Switch, play my Xbox, play my Switch. It's always the back and forth. The Switch is always like the secondary thing before I go back to something else.
Hmm.
So it's probably getting more play than any of the consoles, to be honest with you, just because of that. Because it's always like in between. And the Xbox is probably my dominant machine for one reason. Going back to that backwards compatibility.
Record paddle, yeah.
I have almost 500 games on my Xbox, and PlayStation's not even close to that. So when I keep buying third-party games, they're almost always on Xbox. Like
Hmm.
99% of the time, they're going to be on Xbox, just because I have faith that in 5 years I'll be able to play them. In 10 years, probably be able to play them. Where
Yeah.
again, going back, PlayStation, I have no idea. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. Great, my PS4 games work on my PS5. Thank you, appreciate that. What about the old ones? No, nothing. Okay, my Xbox games still work. Just so you guys know.
Yeah. That's
So
huge. That's huge.
for me, it's huge. Not everyone. No one's as crazy as you or I, Wes. Like some people will never play those games again, ever. They don't care. They just want the new hotness, right? That's it. So my PlayStation is 5 is getting the least play for sure. I think they have some of the best experiences though. Uh, like for example, the God, what is it called? That game that came built into your. Well, you've never even opened up your damn PlayStation 5, have you?
I know. Well, you talk about the playroom, the little
Astro's Playroom or Astro's
yeah.
something. It's dude, that game. It's free. It's built into your PS5.
Mhm.
Still, I still think it's probably my favorite experience on that console.
That's what a lot of people say. A lot of people say.
It's unbelievable how good it is.
Well, my PS5 is going to get some love. Spider-Man 2 is coming out, and that's the only way I'll have to play it. So I will finally, I'll do a video of me cracking open my day one PS5.
Welcome to the ninth generation, Wes.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's where I'm at today, but who knows? Anything can switch, all right? Like, I still
Yeah.
think, here's the truth. I still think PlayStation is making the games that I probably care about the most, but Nintendo's right behind them. Xbox isn't even close. Like, not even close with the games that they're developing. I love Gears still, but
Mhm.
they have a long way to go to really win me over in that front. But the way they've maintained me is really through backwards compatibility and allowing me to keep my library through the years. That's the only way they have kept me relevant in their ecosystem so far. But hopefully, these acquisitions that they have will keep me there longer and give me more stuff. They have just put in they fixed a bunch. I mean, either Microsoft or Activision, probably a partnership between them. They fixed all these old
Mhm.
Call of Duty games, and they're working better than they did originally. Wes, can you believe that?
Oh,
Black
that's
Ops, like the
impressive.
dude, the old Black Ops games are like better than ever. The original like Modern Warfare 2, better than ever. Like now,
Hmm.
it's crazy. It's insane. If only ahead of
Interesting.
time.
I know. I know. Tell me about it. Yeah, and then I'm just thinking about what the 10th generation is going to look like. Like, how much further can technology push itself?
The games
You
aren't
know?
looking that much better. I don't think this generation, like PS5 and Series X, look dramatically better than a PS4 Pro or an Xbox. The hell were those things called? Oh my god, Project Scorpio. What the hell was that called?
Oh, Xbox X.
An Xbox X. Oh, just an X. Okay, the Xbox
Correct.
X. That's right. Sorry for getting confused between the Xbox X and the Xbox Series X. My apologies. That's my fault, not Microsoft's.
How dare you, Matt?
Stupid ass names. My god.
But yeah, so we went through the list of generations and the consoles found within each generation, and we went from 1 to 9, and I don't know, man. My heart still falls within the fourth, fifth, and sixth gen. I mean, I granted, because we're here, I enjoy the eighth and ninth because that's where we are. I
Hmm.
enjoy playing the games that are coming out, but I always go back to the older stuff, man. Fourth, fifth, and sixth is my sweet spot.
I'm torn between a bunch of them too. But if you had to give me one, if you were like you can have every library from whatever generation, it probably would be that sixth generation, because
Oh,
there's
yeah.
so many great games on Dreamcast, Xbox, GameCube, and PS2. Are you kidding me? I don't think there's a way I couldn't pick that generation.
Mm. Ooh, yeah. Okay.
Every game on one generation, you get to pick the generation. Which one do you pick?
One generation.
You only pick one generation, but you get every game on those systems in that generation.
Man, and you know what? I, I would have to, a gun to my head. I would go with the fourth generation. I would.
Fourth generation. That was the Genesis generation, correct?
Yep.
Right.
Turbo Graphics, Genesis, Super Nintendo, Neo Geo, 3DO. Yeah,
That's a damn good one.
I would. I would. That would be my gun to my head. Pick one now. That's it. That's it.
That's a damn good one. I'm not going to argue against it.
You know what? I want people to. If you're watching this video, please comment. I really am curious to see what your favorite generation would be. Rob, I'm talking to you in particular. um, you know, I want to see everybody else's opinions, and I like to read their comments and see where their passions lie and which generation is their favorite, which ones they remember the most. That's
Yeah, if you don't remember what we talked about, go to Wikipedia, look at the list, pick your generation, drop a comment, let us know.